Hi, I'm Samantha of Goddess Awakening. I'm here to hold a safe space and share with you the true and authentic stories of how we got here. Empowering women, elevating for all. All right, welcome to our 20th episode of Goddess Awakening. That's really exciting. I have a new guest coming from the Nashville area. If you guys haven't caught up, I have a lot of friends in Nashville. Val, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm staying indoors today. It's freezing.
Yes, we were just talking about that as well. I think it was like 13 degrees this morning, and we got a nice little dusting of snow.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite a bit colder than where I'm at. Still cold.
Did you guys get any snow?
Yeah, and a little dusting as well. Very chilly. I put on a nice warm sweater today.
Yep, I've been cozy, comfy at home as well today, but also working hard on lots of things. I was talking to someone that's actually in Kentucky, and she said they got like 10 inches of snow, and there was a snow plow stuck in her front yard this morning right before our call. So Kentucky's kind of like our states where they don't get a lot of snow. So when they do, it's like this whole giant mess.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's wild.
Well, thanks for coming on today. I'm really excited. I actually had made a Facebook post, and I was talking to some people about like retail horror stories and corporate world things. And I wanted to see who was out there in my Facebook world that might want to come on and talk about some of their own experiences. And when you commented, I was like, well, this is perfect because now we can talk about that. And then we've also done some workshop spaces together. And you also have your own business. So what more perfect of a guest to have on for this podcast?
Yeah, I'm excited to be on. I think the first time I met you was a couple years ago. The Goddess Awakening festival spiritual tent was at a festival called Greenway in Nashville. And it was really special getting to be a part of that with you there. And I've gotten to see mainly over social media, you follow your dreams and grow. So it's really special to be a part of what you're creating. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I know you had all kinds of things happening in your life since that Greenway space where we had the Goddess Awakening tent. And I've definitely talked about that festival on this podcast. But I remember specifically with you were set up right next to the Goddess Awakening main tent. And one of the nights we had the biggest storm I've ever experienced at a music festival. And why don't you tell us about how that went for you and your tent?
Oh, wow. That was rough. So
yeah,
I guess kind of backstory on that. I had worked in corporate healthcare, worked in corporate sales, and had this idea that I was going to start an art business, vending art. And I also started a second business, doing all spiritual things, a lot of breath work, meditation, manifestation work. And so I had been vending my art for about 2 years before that music festival. And that was actually the last time I ever vended my art. I went to the festival and sort of made this mistake of thinking I could do everything at the festival. I applied to fire spin, to live paint, to teach a workshop, and to vend. And I really think I opened my booth to vend maybe like an hour the entire time I was there. But yeah, this huge storm came in, and, you know, storms happen at music festivals. So I packed everything down the best I could. And that was the worst storm I have ever experienced at a music festival. I stayed, I was camping a little bit far away, but I stayed in my tent, weathered the storm, woke up the next morning, came out, and the water had just pooled in the canopy and the entire thing had collapsed in on all of the handmade things I had made. And it was so hard to move through that. But such a beautiful lesson too in just this non-attachment. And there were some just beautiful people I had met that weekend from the Goddess Awakening tent. And those people were there to hold me and hug me and really comfort me through that. I'm so grateful because that was hard. That was very hard. I thankfully, I only lost a couple paintings and lost some jewelry and whatnot that I had made, but it was sort of this kind of the send off of I had been wanting to stop vending for a while. It didn't feel aligned, and it really felt like the universe destroying my tent and everything of just saying, you don't have to do this anymore. And so that sort of was a segue transition into starting to work in the freelance world of production. And ultimately, it just having that business in general taught me web design and helped with what I do now with doing web design. So it's kind of interesting to look back and see how everything happens for a reason and the ebb and the flow.
Yeah, I remember Dustin, I went to his house in Hot Springs not too long ago, and he had one of your like tile Scrabble letter painting things that you had made on his wall.
Oh, that's
So I was like,
awesome.
I know where that came from. That came from the
Yeah.
festival and that night. And the Goddess Awakening tent, I still have, I joke, but I have like custody of the tent because it belonged to Kyle. But it lives with me now, and I take it to all these events and festivals, which is really special. But that space was one of the only ones somehow that was still dry and safe and clean on the inside. So it was like our one space that we could all go to and just kind of, like I said, hold each other. And it was a pretty wild, like I said, that to me, for sure, even to this day, I think was the worst storm I've ever experienced at a festival. So we just basically bunkered down under canopies and held on until the next morning, and the Goddess Awakening tent was like perfectly dry and like everything was fine inside. It was really crazy.
That's beautiful because that tent had so much love put into it. I remember there was like lights and tapestries hanging and just beautiful pillows. Like it was a vibe. It was a really cool vibe that had been created. So that's awesome that it was protected through that because that was a wild ride.
Yeah, it was. So you said you had been vending for a couple years. When did you get out of like corporate world? Because you've been into, it sounds like, a few different avenues with corporate.
Yeah, I was working in corporate dental at the time, and I was let go from my job, and I had never been let go from a job in my life. It was really shocking. I didn't know what to do with myself. It was the beginning of 2021. And so I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to try to sell my art and see what happens. I had some money saved up and I was just ready to leave. I was so tired of waking up and just sort of the same thing every place I worked in corporate, where I just felt like I was being robbed of my creativity and not living my life with my potential that I had to offer. So yeah, I started this journey of doing so much research, learning about how to find craft markets, how to make a booth, how to price your work. There's so many different things that went into it. Networking and meeting other people that also made art. And it was an interesting change because I definitely found that there were a lot of like negatives in leaving that corporate comfort in a way. Because you don't, whenever you start freelancing or you start vending or have your own business, you might not necessarily have this steady income coming in, and you might not know what you're gonna make, how much money you're gonna make. With vending, it's even more challenging because something as simple as the weather, the rain, or being really cold can make an event have not a lot of people. And oftentimes that's something that you've invested money into, time into preparing, and it could be totally out of your hands. So in that way, it was really beautiful of getting to really push myself and become my own boss, and that I'm really grateful for everything I learned from that. I will say at no point was I able to pay my bills from doing that. I very much so had to rely on doing other things, freelancing other things. I would do things like clean Airbnbs or drive for Lyft or Uber, whatever I needed to do to keep fueling that dream. But it was well worth it, I would say.
Yeah, I definitely so I actually left Best Buy, I think it's like any day now, but very early January of 2021. was like one of my last days. I like turned my laptop in and walked out the doors and like burst out into tears. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, what am I going to do now? But I don't know, but I'm going to figure out what it is that I like actually enjoy doing. And I kind of had some ideas of what that is. But again, like you said, you kind of have to figure out how to still pay your bills and still stay above water, while also spending time on the things that you're passionate about. So I've definitely done my fair share of door dashing. I love DoorDash because you don't really have to talk to people. You can just drop it off at their door. I've learned from my time becoming sober from alcohol that I actually am quite the introvert. I feel like this whole time I've been convincing myself that I'm an extrovert because I like to party and do all these wild events and things like that, which I still enjoy hosting the events. But now I'm realizing, oh, without alcohol, I'm much more introverted. So I like to have my home time and my working from a computer time or whatever. But then I also think it was actually during COVID, I started doing the like grocery shopping gigs where you would go grocery shopping and then drop it off at the sweet little grandma's house. And I actually really liked that one because I felt like I was actually really helping people who didn't feel safe going into, stores and grocery stores and things like that. And typically people tipped really well during that time. So that was also pretty nice. So I've definitely done my fair share of a little bit of that myself.
That's awesome. Also, too, I know you mentioned being sober, and I've seen you on your sober journey, and I just wanted to congratulate you on that because I know you've reached some milestones time-wise within that, and I started doing that last year, and I'm not fully a year in, but it's challenging. So I see you in that.
You too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's so cool, though, too, that actually, it sounds like we left corporate world around the same time.
Yeah. Yes,
and it was still like weird in the world. I think it sounds like in a way it was sort of beneficial for you. This like tips were probably a little bit better playing off of the COVID times. So that's awesome.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I had been at Best Buy for it was like 7.5 years. And I had done basically I was like the cell phone lady. So I was always in the mobile department and got up to the supervisor role. So I was in leadership for most of the time I was at Best Buy. And then there was a separate but together company with Best Buy called Magnolia Audio Video. And they were the only commission-based role in the company. And commission to me was always like this terrible thing that I never wanted to be a part of. But I also was very much encouraged to apply for the position. So I did, and I was actually the first female Magnolia employee in Oklahoma City, like ever, which is really crazy to think about. But I got really good at the job because it basically was just taking care of clients. And I had already built such a client base that people only wanted to shop with me. So some people would have to worry about building their client base in the beginning. And people had been there for 5, 6, 7 years in that role. But I was about 1.5 years in, and I was doing about the same amount of business with clients I already had. So I didn't really have to worry about my walk-in business. And the job itself was actually really cool. So like we had a showroom, and I haven't been inside of Best Buy in 4 years. So I don't know if this is still there or not, but we had a big showroom, and you could have, 3 to 4 different rooms. And it was like a giant theater room and like the highest audio video home systems that you could ever dream of, like on display. We got to play with it all and listen to it and demo music, build theater rooms, like I was saying, and whole home networking. And it was really cool, like to just go build these dream spaces for people. But it was commission. So there was lots of snaky things that I just could not stand. It was like, if I wasn't at the store and one of my customers came through, or someone that I'd worked with came through, and someone just happened to, take the sale while I was gone or whatever. And that stuff happened all the time. So it was like you would be losing thousands of dollars because you were helping another customer with an issue or whatever. And my manager at the time was actually one of my favorite managers I had the whole time I worked at Best Buy, because I definitely have a lot of horror stories with managers, men and women. And he had a reputation because he had been with Best Buy for a long time, but he at one point had like thrown chairs in a meeting or something because he was so hyped up. And that kind of excited me in this weird way that he was just very passionate, I guess. But he definitely wasn't like that by the time that I worked with him. But he definitely was like one of my favorite managers. But the above management and the like middle management and just all the games you had to play to like try to get moved up, and it was it was just too much for me. And my final straw was it was during, COVID time, so 2020. And my role is to go into people's homes and to be in their space. Well, obviously COVID happened, and even in Oklahoma, where they didn't really care about COVID here for a while, it was like, Best Buy is corporate. So that actually helped me in that case, where it was like Best Buy didn't want us going into homes. So they made all these extra precautions, and we basically could only work from home. We couldn't go into people's houses for a little while. So I had to adjust to that. And at first I was like, I don't know how to function like this. I'm used to being with people all the time. And eventually I kind of started to love it because, like I said, I had a clientele already. So I didn't have to worry about walk-in business. I had people calling me to buy stuff. And then, there was the COVID precautions and things we're supposed to follow and do so people don't get sick. But the general manager at the store didn't care about those things. And there was many times where I didn't feel safe at work because we don't know anything about COVID at the time. And we can, say different things about it 4 years later. But at the time, it was a scary thing that was making people sick and we were dying. So I was definitely one who was very precautious. I wore my mask, I washed my hands and the hand sanitizer. And at one point, I wasn't feeling well. So I had, filled out the little form at the front of the store that we're supposed to do. And I didn't, quote unquote, pass the COVID, whatever. But no one had followed it at this point. So about a week later, he lets my manager know that he doesn't want me in the store because he decided basically to start following the COVID rules for me, because that would mean that I wouldn't be in the store for Black Friday. And yes, it's crazy to think Best Buy was open for Black Friday 2020. Like, what?
Oh my God.
But yeah, I guess he decided he wanted to start following the rules so that I could not be in the store for Black Friday. And again, I'm commission based. So this is one of the busiest days that, retail is going to have. It was definitely a spiteful thing. Like, I had to file an HR claim and all of this stuff, and nothing happened. But ironically enough, I ended up making like almost the most amount of sales that day because I had so many clients who just wanted to buy things from me and they just would text me. So people were kind of mad about that. So his plan didn't really work. But after that, I was like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. It's not worth it. And they had sucked me in because I made a good amount of money. Like, I was making a lot of money when I left Best Buy. And it was like this huge decision to leave this really nice, like you said, consistent paycheck, healthcare, time off, and all of those things behind. But I knew that, like, at the time I was on Xanax and I'm sorry, not Xanax. I was on Prozac and Adderall for like the whole time I was at those last like 2.5 years. And I took them daily, and it was part of my prescription for my doctor. And that's basically how I functioned every day at that job. And I was like, I don't want to keep doing this forever. I don't want to have to rely on medicine to function and pay my bills. So I finally went and talked to my manager and told him that I was going to close out the jobs that I had with my existing clients and put my 2 weeks in. And I actually was just at the end of finishing my biggest job, like all-in-one job, for one of my clients' houses. He had already spent about $40,000 with me for upgrades in his Chicago home. And the last job that I did was just over $200,000 from one client in one home. So
Wow.
just goes to show, like, I really was making a name for myself and building my book of business and taking care of clients. But I had to make a choice and I had to go. And then I walked out of Best Buy. I burst into tears. I had actually scheduled my very first Reiki session. I didn't really know much about it. And I went straight to that Reiki session that I'd scheduled like 3 weeks before. And it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. And I feel like that was really the beginning of like me opening the door to this spiritual community that I'm still learning and about myself and about the people in the space and like what that means to me. And I went cold turkey and it no longer took Adderall or Prozac ever
Oh my
again. So,
gosh.
which everyone's like, that's crazy, which it was. But I did. And that's from there on, I was like, I'm only going to do what brings me joy, what actually, you know, helps me with my future endeavors and like what I want to do in the future. And I knew that was something with music, event planning, and animals. So that's what I've been on this journey since, 4 years ago now. It's crazy to think about.
Good for you. That's such a hard thing to move out of. I have so many parallels to your story. I did not work in tech sales for as long as you did. I did it for about a year, but oh my gosh, I feel you so much. It was like I was on salary and commission, but like the amount of money you can make doing that and the just different perks that come with doing it make it so much harder to get out of it. I've heard this term someone's used before with jobs like that called golden handcuffs, where just like the money is so enticing. And when you leave it, it's like quite a bit different. And I also reached that point where I was like, am I really happy doing this? Is there more for me out here? And I also used to I took Prozac and anxiety medicine, and I had stopped taking it the year I went into tech sales. And so for me, it was like so noticeable when I became unhappy because I didn't have that medicine sort of like feeding into this illusion. And, medicine is a choice. There's a time and place for different things, but when you're not on it, you're not, there's not like this veil over you. Like things are more clear of when you're actually not happy. And that's such a pivotal point that you stopped taking it too. 'Cause that's like the hardest time to stop taking it, when you take this big leap. So kudos to you. That's crazy. Oh
Yeah,
man.
a little bit, but it worked out. I definitely think about Adderall sometimes. I'm not going to lie. Like it absolutely helps you stay focused. And like it was something that did help me for a long time, but it was when it was Sunday and it was my day off and I didn't take it. I mean, I was just a pile. I just had nothing. There was nothing. It was like so clear that I was so reliant on this drug to get anything done. And I was actually on a pretty low dose. Like I had a really great doctor, so I'm thankful for that too. But I would take like one in the morning and then like a smaller dose like halfway through like early evening, because the job required me to go for at least 10, 11 hours a day. And everyone has my phone number. So I've got my manager texting me, my coworkers, the project managers, the clients, like nonstop. And I actually know that's why I'm probably still working through some phone anxiety, because I was constantly like dealing with issues and fixing things, and it all came from my phone. So I've definitely worked through some phone anxiety thanks to that job as well.
I have still not worked through my phone anxiety. Whenever I did tech sales, it was all over the phone. And it's a topic that's been brought up with our design agency. My partner wants to do phone call sales, and I've tried to do a few, and it's so hard. Like, I would rather run like 10 miles or something to tech. There's a lot of anxiety that can come up with that, because you never know what you're going to pick up. If it's going to be someone that's angry, if it's going to be someone that's ranting, or someone that you get stuck on the phone for an hour. You never know what you're walking into. Oh.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely some trauma that came along from all of the years of sales. And of course, there's definitely some really good positive things that came from my time there as well. I mean, leading a team and like knowing that not every single person on your team is going to need the same thing from me. Like everyone gets motivated in different ways, and to understand that and to be able to cater to, most of the time I had like 8 to 12 people on my teams typically, but it's like knowing how to motivate people and knowing that this person is going to react differently than this person, and this person wants to be pushed harder, but this person, if you push them too hard, they're just going to cry. So definitely I learned a lot of just like managing people and connecting more with people. And I think that's helped me a lot with my growing Goddess Awakening team now, especially where it's like I actually have people in roles and I'm starting to give away some of the control of not just making myself do everything, which I'm still there. This is only, we're going into year 3 of the festival. But I was talking to someone, her name's Paige. She runs Playthink out of Kentucky, and she also has Kentucky Yoga Festival and a Mushroom Festival, and she does all these retreats, and that's what she does full time. Well, this is their 14th year, and she was saying, like, oh yeah, I don't even know who's applied for this, that, the other, because I have people to do that. And I'm like, wow, that sounds exciting. I want to get to that point too. But yeah, all that to say, I feel like it's definitely helped me with just knowing how to talk to people. And then like customer service is a big one that I've gained a lot of knowledge from my time in sales, where it's like that's the hard part with corporate. It's like you need to sell this amount of dollars and you need to sell all these Best Buy credit cards and you need to get the protection plans and add-ons and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, I was always a person who just wanted to sell them what they needed, which worked to my advantage personally. But when it came to like management, they were like, well, they only wanted this. How come you didn't sell them $10,000 more? So that part was always really hard for me because I didn't want to oversell people, which I think I still have some things around that at this point, which is funny because like when I start to really talk about Goddess Awakening and like why I started it and how it began, people are like, whoa, that's so amazing. And my boyfriend, Brian, jokes about it, but he's like, yeah, she's not really good about talking about, what it is she does. But as soon as we do, people are like wowed and amazed by it. But I think that comes back to a little bit of my sales trauma where it's like, I don't want to be too pushy or make people feel like they're in a corner and have to buy this thing. But this time I'm selling something that I'm very passionate about. So that's the part that I have to remind myself. I'm not just selling stuff to people who don't necessarily need it. This time I'm actually selling something that like I care about and I'm passionate about. But definitely some trauma around sales.
Yeah, I think it's so important to keep that mindset of what you're doing with Goddess Awakening, and the way that you want to sell it is from like this place of love and what you're doing. Because yeah, when it's numbers based, it just becomes cringy. And for me, I like definitely felt myself put up this block around it because I was the same way. And it was like we would have these meetings every week, where you'd sit down and how many people did you talk to this week, or how many sales you could do better. And it always made me feel too that like no matter how hard I tried, it was never good enough every single week. It's so hard. Like in the corporate, there's just this mindset of like, you can do better, you can do better. And it really runs down people that are doing their best and that are talented. So it is special whenever you get to have your own business and know that you doing your best is your best. And when it's aligned with what you're passionate about and what you're interested in a way, I've always found that you will find success if you keep doing it. You don't need to run yourself into this space where you're just unhappy from putting so much pressure on yourself that's just unrealistic in a way. Do you miss anything from it? I'm curious.
I actually really do miss. We used to always have these like probably quarterly or so like trainings, and they would send like all of the leaders to this like leadership training in like Dallas or whatever the market was, for example. And it would be like everyone in the market that's in leadership would go to these things, and they put us up in a hotel for a couple of nights, and they would teach us about all of the new like products and services. But then at the end of the day, it was a networking thing. And I loved the networking portion because I joked about it earlier, but like I literally was the cell phone lady of Oklahoma City. So it was like managers would call me from different stores in Oklahoma City and ask me for help with stuff. And I was always the one that was like, oh, we don't have this in stock. Well, I'm going to get it from you. Let me call my buddy. So I always had like friends I could call up at like multiple cities across the country at any Best Buy, or I would like stop in at Memphis and say hi to my friends. But yeah, I've literally been inside of Best Buy once since I quit, and I really needed that little cable to connect your Cricut machine to your laptop, like the very first time. And I needed it so bad. And I was like, I want to use this. I'm just going to go to Best Buy. And I did see one of my friends that I worked with for a long time. But yeah, not since. But from what I've heard from people that I do know there, has been a bunch of restructures. And that was a scary part too. They were constantly restructuring. So like I never got the cut with any of my roles. Thankfully, I was always in like the right position at the right time. But a lot of the like higher up management people have been cut and cut and cut to the point where there's really not that much left. And so I really don't even know who still works at Best Buy to this point. But yeah, definitely just like the networking and like having clients that wanted to come shop with me. And I would be at like, I worked at Midwest City, the South Side, the North Side, and Quail Springs, and actually opened up the Sooner Mall when it used to be there. So I've worked at lots of Best Buys. And then my partner at the time ran the Norman store. So it was like everyone knew me, and there was like tons of friendship. But also looking back, there was a lot of heavy drinking involved. So there's that.
I miss that as well. At first, most of my jobs up until now, I got to be around like people and physical, and I do miss that. Is kind of working from home is pretty isolating. But yeah, like I think that's a pretty common thing I experienced too. When I was around a lot of different jobs I've had in the past, where when people go out, it's Friday after work, like let's go grab a drink. That's a pretty challenging thing to do once you stop drinking. There are some places that accommodate people that don't drink, but not a lot. So like culturally, it's like, let's move through this entire day that was really hard, and now let's disassociate together in a way. It's kind of bad.
Yep. And I will say my schedule was pretty nice. I was usually like the 10 to 6 or the 11 to 7. So literally I was never a morning person ever. So I'm, I guess, grateful and also not for that. But then when I started about a year and a half ago, I started working at a doggy grooming salon, and we open at 7 a.m. So when they wanted to hire me, they were like, well, we want you to be the morning receptionist, and you would have to be there at like 6:50. And I was like, in the morning? Excuse me?
Oh, no.
So that was quite the life adjustment. But yeah, now my sleeping in is like maybe 8:30. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've wasted so much of my day. So that's definitely a total flop from where I used to be. But I don't like staying out late at all. I like going to bed. I really love bedtime.
I've been struggling with that ever since I started. I was used to most of my life, having to be a job at 7 or 8 a.m. And now that we run our own business, we usually work from like noon to 8 p.m., which is great. It's like kind of a reverse day. Like we usually sleep in until about 8, go to the gym, make breakfast together, and then work. I'm trying to get back on track with my schedule. It's sort of hard whenever you make your own schedule to be disciplined with it.
Yeah, it definitely is. I was going to say, tell us about what you're doing now with your business.
Yeah, so I started a business with my partner about a year ago. We were both working in production world, freelancing, doing LED and lighting stuff. And he broke his collarbone when we were mountain biking. And so we were like, okay,
wow.
What can we do right now for us to be able to make money to pay our bills that would utilize the skills that we have? And we both, from having prior businesses and from helping friends, had made websites and knew how to do graphic design. So we decided to make a legit business, an LLC, and went through the process of doing that and growing it and getting clients. And, a lot of that started out with getting clients from people that we knew and getting a lot of referrals. And it's been growing, and I'm really, really excited. I still do production work here and there, but it's just really special to have a job doing web design and branding, because I feel like I'm getting to help other people follow their dreams and helping them fill in the gaps where there's, some stuff that's a little bit more complex knowledge in the world of marketing and branding yourself. And so, yeah, I feel like I'm a little dream maker in a way. It's really cool. Yeah. And I get to be creative every day. Today I've been working on making an email for a education tech company, software company. So that's been pretty cool. I'm just getting to design different graphics and do copywriting. So yeah, it's a little bit of the gist of the business. We don't necessarily have a niche at this point. We've just been helping people that it feels aligned to help, which has been a lot of everything.
That's cool.
Yeah. I think another thing that's really special too with getting to have our own business is we don't necessarily have to work with people if they're disrespectful or mean, or whatever comes with that. It's been a nice thing of sort of being able to set boundaries of how we're treated. And thankfully we've not run into a lot of things that have been too challenging in that regards. But that's one thing I just really remember experiencing in the past, working in healthcare, working in tech sales and different jobs, is customer service, all that sort of thing, is people can be really mean. And oftentimes you have to just put on this mask and take it. And I don't have to do that anymore. If someone's mean, I'm like, okay, I don't think this is aligned to work together. And so I'm really grateful for that with the business too.
Boundaries is definitely a big one. And it's funny, we actually talked about it quite a bit today in my call with Paige. And to me, she's like doing everything that I'm aspiring to do. And like her main event, Playthink, is a sober event. And we talked about what that actually means and like how that's like a scary thing for me to do, where it's like, we didn't make it a sober event, but actually a lot of people reached out and asked, like, is this a sober event? And it's not officially a sober event, but I feel like we're definitely sober leaning. But it's like the boundaries, like where do you put the boundaries up? And like you said, with working with people, and I have my business around Goddess Awakening, and obviously my main event is the festival, but we do events throughout the year as well. And we're definitely in the planning process, like of locking in dates, like right now for the rest of the year. And we've had lots of discussions of not taking it personal when people don't reach out to me about, doing these events with me, and we're all about the community, but then people forget that, my brand existed, and I think it's a lot to do with the boundaries that I have set, that I don't want to be a part of these events anymore, especially, which I have been in the past. So I think maybe there's a disconnect there, but I've set these boundaries that I don't want to be a part of these events that, a big focus is people doing drugs in the bathroom or on the dance floor for that matter. And that just being like a big focus, because that's not what I'm going for at all. And a big thing that I'm passionate about for a long time has been harm reduction. And especially since losing a very close friend to us, a year ago, where it's like, how do we help more people go home to their families at the end of the night? And when events don't feel safe, I don't want to be a part of it. And also, like, people will ask me about helping with their events, but then they have no women booked. And I'm like, well, that's the whole message of what I'm doing is, my festival will not be an all women's festival. I don't think at any point. I don't think that's the purpose either for what I'm doing, but we're always going to book at least 50% women. So if you're not booking 50% women, I don't feel aligned to participate, in your events. But because of my boundaries, Yeah, lots of lessons have been learned because of boundaries. But at the end of the day, it is still my business, so I do get to make those decisions for who we, do or don't work with. And it's not personal, but like you were saying, if it's not aligned, then we get to make those choices for ourselves.
Mm, yeah, that's such a hard one when you talk about doing festivals that are free of substances. I've I've went through the journey of going to different music festivals and shows since I was like 16 and becoming uh what I would call Cali sober more or less this year, but not in a really not in a dependent way, just more of a once in a while way. But it's it's challenging to be around people at festivals for me sometimes that are deep in it. And, to some degree I've been there, so I understand. But I also think too that, maybe why people are asking if it's a sober event is because in a way they see you leading by example. They maybe see some of the posts that you've made about not drinking. And I think too, even me just being around my friends sometimes and not doing anything when they're doing something, and maybe they see this light within you of your happiness and joy of being able to dance and being able to have meaningful conversations. I think to some people that's something that can really open their eyes. And it is important to set boundaries around stuff too, especially in the vision of what you're trying to create and what direction you're trying to put everything into. But it's also special too for people to just be around you. And in a way, I think that's enough as well to change people's minds and influence them on their journey in a subtle way.
Right. It's inspiring and also triggering. So, and I've experienced both. I'm also a reflector in the human design, so I'm already very much a trigger for people. But this no and sober to me, it's not my favorite word. I don't like attach to it much, but alcohol free definitely. Definitely on the California sober thing as well myself. But we've spent quite a good amount of time with Jason Turner, you know him,
Mhm.
and he has been on this incredible journey that I've got to see firsthand kind of on the background where he's making a lot of changes in his life. And my boyfriend also isn't drinking alcohol with me. We started at the same time, and anytime Turner's with us, he will, be out to lunch, or even we'll go to some dive bars and have lunch or whatever. And he's like, it's kind of nice, like being around people who don't drink alcohol, because then I'm not just ordering a random drink for no reason. And he's told it. He was like, it's really inspiring, and people have said that. And I'm like, that feels really good to be like a good influence, because I've been quite the opposite person, where I'm the person at parties encouraging people to like take all these shots and drink more beer and who wants a shotgun. And so it's very interesting to see like the complete opposite version of what I was living before. But it's really cool too. But like you were saying too, I definitely feel at festivals, especially like the bigger festivals, I've noticed where there's just so much going on. And I've worked ground control with like EDC Vegas and Orlando, where we're literally the ones walking around, and like if we see people drop to the ground, we're supposed to help them get to the medic tent. And while it's a very rewarding job, it's also very traumatizing and very hard to see all these people who are out there like just taking tons of drugs or drinking so much alcohol and not enough water, or really at the end of the day, just like not taking care of themselves. And yes, we are helping. So I've really appreciated getting to help people in that way. But I kind of joked, like, I think I'm retiring from doing that with like big, huge events, because I feel like there's just so much more we can be doing on like these smaller scale events, like the under 5,000. But yeah, definitely I get triggered by certain things. I was definitely like a hard no on tanks for Goddess Awakening, and I made sure that was on the rules up ahead of time. I actually had one of our artists like thank me for doing that before they even came out to the festival because they're recovering from that addiction and just hearing the noise is super triggering to them. So yeah, boundaries. I think that's a really important thing for us to have and definitely one that I'm still working on to hold for myself. And, what are those boundaries, especially in this festival event world? But that's also where I'm like, what is my target audience for Goddess Awakening? My goal is to bring the healing world and the music world together. So I'm not throwing, a dance festopia or, one of these giant music festivals that's booking, just rager events all the time. Like that's not my audience. And I have to remember that too. So setting the boundaries is going to open more space for the right people to come into our space. And I have to remind myself that every day.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious if you've ever thought about or maybe have in the past incorporating like an ecstatic dance into Goddess Awakening, which typically the ones I've experienced are substance free.
Yeah, we actually had one artist who I literally discovered her from Instagram, but she came from Dallas. And I found her because she does ecstatic dance in the Dallas area, but she also plays like drum and bass and other kinds of like electronic music. And her set was one of my favorites. And I'm like, you're the exact person I want at my events where you can do it all. And have those spaces for people. And like we've been talking about what the Road to Goddess Awakening events look like this year. And we want to bring more of that into our space where it's like, let's start the event out with a sound healing with sound bowls or a meditation and like set the intentions and not just bring people in to party. Like I was at this party, it was my friend's party and I had a good time, but I'm also, like I said, I don't drink alcohol and it was at a bar. So there's music and there's alcohol. So it's like there's not much to do if you don't drink alcohol. And I felt it so deeply that night. And my pen died. So I was even more panicking. So I like sat in my car for like 30 minutes. And that's when I really started to think like, I want there to be more of an experience for people when they come to even our Road 2 events where, we have like a candy making station or we've talked about different ways for artists to network with each other. But yeah, ecstatic dance would be another great one. And there are some wonderful people here in my market that already do it. And I'm actually going to be attending a sound healing cacao ceremony on Friday, which I'm super excited about.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I love plant medicines. And I would love to bring more of that into the goddess space as well, like cacao and blue lotus, things of that nature. We've even talked about hape. And then as far as education goes, like, I don't feel that Goddess Awakening, our main event, is ever going to be an event where I'm like, let's do psilocybin ceremonies. And I've done one and it's magical and very powerful. But I don't feel that's the space for it. I feel like we could have another event where we could then invite you in a smaller space and a smaller circle to do it with like trained people to, handle the circles. But what if we had circles and workshops where we just talked about like psilocybin or we just talked about, DMT or ayahuasca or we can learn more about what it is because I like to ask lots of questions anyway. And I'm sure other people are the same way. So if we could just open the space to talk about more things, I think that would be really cool. So we had like 25 hours of workshops this year at Goddess, and I anticipate us having even more. But the workshop space was, I don't want to say my most proud because the stage was obviously incredible too. But I'm very thankful for the intention that we got to put into the workshop space this year. And the amount of healing that happened in that space and people reaching out to me after the fact and just literally saying like this weekend saved their lives and the community that they found that weekend and how thankful they are for the workshops. And it was just, the workshop space was really a special, intentional space. So I feel like this time at Goddess Awakening, it was like everything I had envisioned truly came to life in every area. So I'm really excited to put more time and effort into the workshop space, even more going forward.
I'm so excited to see this project that you've got grow. I feel like every single year as you keep stepping into your higher self, that's being reflected into what you've created. And every year it sounds like you're getting connected more and more with the people that are helping you grow and helping you expand this into what you want. I'm just so excited. I'm so excited for
Thank
you.
you. Yeah, it definitely feels like the dots are connecting more and more and more. And I hosted the first year in 2022, and it was basically Kyle and Turner did production, and then me and Brian Barons. I was like, "Hey, you want to help me throw a music festival? Because we're gonna do it." And he's like, "Yeah, whatever you need." And he's my best friend still, so it's really awesome. And now my partner's name is Brian, so it's very confusing. But I have a best friend Brian and a boyfriend Brian who also get along really well. So now I've got two Brians in my circle, and of course Turner and Kyle's there in spirit. And since then my circle is growing, and like the people that I can trust are there. And like I said, the meetings I'm having with people, it's so exciting. And I met with Bass and Babes, who she's based out of LA the other day, and we talked about a collaboration. And then we're talking with people on the East Coast about doing a collaboration, and it's people doing the events that are so aligned with booking more women. So that feels really good too, where it's like I'm really stepping into the vision of what I want Goddess to be.
Yeah, that's so special. Yeah, I was curious. I don't know how much more time we have, but I was sort of curious if you've had any sort of like food or beverage vendors who've offered any sort of like non-alcoholic drinks at the festival.
Yeah, so that's actually something we're still calling in. I am envisioning some kind of like tea sanctuary type space where people could have like teas, like herbal teas. They could have, I've seen like different elixirs, kava, coffee, CBD even. I love CBD, so having that in a drink form would be really cool. So I've talked to a few people about like what I want that to kind of look like, but it hasn't come to fruition yet. So we're definitely manifesting that space to come to life, because nowadays there really are so many non-alcoholic options. Not necessarily in every, restaurant or bar that you go to, but there's tons of companies out there. And I try and find them and follow them because it's so fun to find. But yeah, we're manifesting that space to come to fruition, because I feel like that will be a whole like area of the festival where be like this big nice tent and people can go under and like sit at a cute little table and drink some tea. And yeah, because we don't sell alcohol at the festival,
Oh, that's
so people
beautiful.
can bring it in if they wanted to. But it was actually kind of crazy. Like I feel like this year was very tame. It didn't feel like I had my friends that had never been to a festival that are retreat friends come and had no idea what to experience, what to expect. And I was like, this is a good stepping stone for you then. And they had a wonderful time. And like my vendor friends who were typically, retreat people, they came and they were like, oh my gosh, this is great. I can't wait to come back. And the music. And we definitely had probably about like 80% electronic music of all varieties this year. Much less rhythm than the first year. So I'm very proud of my growth there. But this next year, we want to have maybe like a 35-65 split with more like live acts and singers and bands and things like that.
Yeah, I think kind of maybe this might be the wrong word to say, but I love the more grassroots, smaller festivals, which obviously your festival is growing each year, but it's just so much more intimate in that way than some of the the bigger festivals like Bonnaroo or Electric Forest or whatever.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
yeah.
Bonnaroo is my home festival, but I don't know that I'll be back to it. There's just so many other options, and going to a big festival doesn't really feel super exciting to me anymore.
I feel the
But I
same
am very
way.
thankful for Bonnaroo.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm so grateful for that. Was my first festival as Bonnaroo when I turned 18. But the older I get and the more I go on my sober journey, I crave going to more of these like intimate smaller spaces where it's like not, I'm not just in this energy of chaos and in this energy of so many people maybe like trying new things for the first time, or just maybe not really awake or aware of the way they're acting and how it's influencing everybody around them. And I feel like at these more intimate festivals, people just don't do that as much. I'm not sure why, but it seems to not happen as much.
Maybe there's more eyes to watch the situation if it's happening.
Yeah, you can't you can't get away with it in that way. Yeah.
Right. But it's really cool to like be at the festival and then like know all the vendors and know your neighbors and actually get to see people more than once. Like I remember I went to Coachella one year, and I love Coachella. It's a great big festival, but I made some friends one day and I was like, I'll never see him again. And then I found him the next day. I was like, this is a miracle. So then we exchanged Instagrams, and then we saw him the third day and I was like, okay, this is crazy. But that doesn't happen at big festivals, you know?
Yeah, it's pretty rare.
Yeah, Playthink, the one I was talking about, that'll be in June. We'll be there with a Goddess Awakening theme camp, which I'm excited about. So we're going to have some workshops in our space, and we're going to have some like interactive things, and we're going to have some music as well. But she just moved to a new venue. So they've been doing about 2,500. And she said the new venue is actually going to cap out at about 1,200. So she wants to keep it smaller.
Oh, wow.
So I'm really looking forward to, you know, probably about 1,500 people total all in. So that'll be a nice spot to check out.
I've been wanting to go to one of those festivals for quite a while now. I want to say Playthink was during Bonnaroo last year.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I'm at this space where if I go, I'm probably gonna have to go alone, and I feel so afraid to try to navigate a festival
we'll be
alone. There. Yeah, I know you guys are good people. And I think too, going to a festival alone, I'm sure usually there's like Facebook groups and stuff. I'm sure if you posted in it, someone would help you. And they're more like intimate festivals where people would help you set up your tent and whatnot.
Coachella was my very first solo festival.
Wow. So you've done it.
And yes, I did it quite a bit in 2022. That's when I was like living in California, kind of like my marriage was falling apart. I was kind of escaping from my life and also doing field research because I wanted to learn more and more about festivals. But yeah, Coachella was my very first time. And I remember getting there and being like, how the fuck am I going to set up my canopy? Like what? With one person. And I set up my canopy and my tent and my table and made like a little makeup station and did it all by myself. And I was so proud of myself.
Wow. What a baddie.
I made friends with my neighbors too. Yeah. So it's definitely because I had gone with, you know, my big group of friends to Bonnaroo for like 9 years. And there's like 80 to 100 of us, which is fun. It's great. There's a wonderful community, and you can't really do what you really want to do all the time. So when you're by yourself, you're like, I'm going to go get a lemonade, and now I'm going to sit in the grass for an hour or take a nap, or I'm going to fix my hair for way too long. Like you can literally do whatever you want. So highly recommend.
That sounds great.
It's a great experience.
I think it would also just be a great experience to grow and get out of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a lot of the things that I'm saying out are, you know, limits that I'm putting on myself, because you just said you can set up your canopy and tent and all the things. You just got to get there and it'll happen.
Yep.
That's awesome.
I definitely recommend it. It's fun. Well, what's the name of your business?
Our business is called Design in Flow.
Design in Flow. Perfect. So when I post this, we'll definitely post a link to your socials or wherever we can find you guys. But yeah, I really appreciate getting to connect with you. I haven't talked to you in real life in like 2.5 years.
No, it's been a minute.
It's really cool.
Thanks for having me on the podcast. It's really cool to get to be on my first podcast and be a part of what you're creating, because it's really beautiful.
Yeah, it's great to hear what you guys are up to as well. So thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Goddess Awakening. Check out our linktree in the description for all our socials and upcoming events. This podcast is brought to you by the Possibilities Podcast platform.